What if I told you that the biggest threat to the US banking system right now isn't a stock market crash, isn't a recession, and isn't something most Americans are even aware of? It's a single number so quietly dangerous that FDIC officials are discussing it behind closed doors. And here's the kicker, and almost nobody will say this out loud. Banks already know these losses exist. They just haven't officially recognized them yet. When a bank fails, it doesn't happen overnight. We, the public, only ever see the final collapse on the evening news or in a shocking headline. But the truth is, the damage starts months, sometimes years, earlier, growing silently in the background. So what is the earliest warning sign of trouble? It's something most Americans have never heard of. It's called the allowance for credit losses, or ACL. Think of ACL as a bank's financial honesty score. It's a single line on a balance sheet that tells you exactly how much money the bank expects to lose from loans that get repaid. And the critical part is this: when a bank's ACL rises sharply, it's the closest thing to them admitting, hey, we're expecting more people to default on their loans. Official FDIC data shows that banks quietly raise these numbers long before the public ever hears about any problems. Essentially, ACL is the silent alarm bell of the banking world. It's the smoke before the fire. So why am I talking about this now? Because something alarming is happening with these numbers. Right now, delinquent loans, but that's loans where payments are late, are rising across nearly every single category. This isn't just about credit cards or auto loans. We're talking about homeowners, small businesses, and especially commercial real estate. Every sector of the economy that relies on borrowing is feeling the pressure. You'd think that with all these late payments, banks would be aggressively increasing their ACLs, their rainy day fund for bad loans. You'd expect them to be honest about the risks, right? Well, that's where the story gets really concerning. The bigger problem is that most banks aren't fully recognizing these potential losses yet. They're delaying it, maybe hoping the economy will magically turn around and these numbers will fix themselves. But numbers don't just fix themselves. They pile up quietly behind the scenes, creating what are known as unrealized losses. This is the financial equivalent of ignoring a crack in a dam. Now, you can pretend it's not there, but the pressure is building. We saw this exact pattern play out before the 2008 financial crisis, and again with the regional bank failures last year. Banks held onto assets that were losing value, pretending everything was fine, until suddenly it wasn't. So here's the uncomfortable truth. While everyone is distracted by inflation or stock market swings, this slow-moving train of bad debt is chugging along in the background. The banks know it's there, the regulators know it's there, but the official numbers on their public balance sheets don't yet reflect the full reality. They are under-reserving for the storm they can see brewing on the horizon. This isn't about spreading fear. It's about understanding the mechanics of risk that are often hidden from plain sight. The system is designed to delay the recognition of bad news. But eventually, reality always catches up. The question isn't if these losses will be recognized, but when. And when that day comes, the headlines might once again be talking about bank instability. By understanding what the allowance for credit losses tells us, you're looking at the same data the insiders see. You're looking at the warning signs before they become a full-blown crisis. It's crucial to stay informed about these underlying trends because they have a ripple effect across the entire economy. You might have heard whispers that something isn't quite right with the banking system, but what if I told you the problem is much bigger and quieter than anyone is letting on? The Federal Reserve's own reports are showing something alarming: unrealized loan losses that, as the money banks have lost, but haven't officially admitted to yet, are at levels we haven't seen since the 2008 financial crisis. This isn't just a theory, these are the Fed's own numbers. The financial system is taking on water, but so slowly that most people haven't noticed. It's like a quiet leak deep inside a ship's hull, weakening the entire structure bit by bit before any alarms go off. So why the secrecy? Why wouldn't a bank just report these losses right away? Well, the moment they do, the consequences are immediate and severe. Their balance sheets look weaker, their capital ratios drop, and regulators start asking very uncomfortable questions. But if they just delay recognizing the loss, everything on paper looks perfectly fine. Stock prices stay stable, depositors don't panic, and the regulators have no official reason to step in. It's a classic case of kick the can down the road. But behind this curtain of calm, the losses are still there, quietly growing and compounding like a hidden debt that gets bigger every single day. If you dig into the data from the FDIC, you'll see a fascinating pattern. Dozens of regional banks are quietly increasing their allowance for credit losses, or ACLs, at the fastest pace in years. This is essentially the money they set aside for loans they expect to go bad. But here's the kicker: they're doing this without making a single public announcement. This isn't a sign of panic, it's a sign of preparation. They see what's coming and are trying to build a firewall before the fire starts. It's a subtle but powerful signal that they know trouble is brewing beneath the surface. Now, if there's one sector that's likely to be the catalyst, the one that forces banks to finally face the music, it's commercial real estate. Just think about it. Office buildings in major cities are sitting empty at record levels. The shift to remote work isn't a temporary trend. It's a permanent change in how we do business. On top of that, refinancing costs have more than doubled. This has created a perfect storm where some iconic buildings in cities like New York, Chicago, and San Francisco are now worth less than the loans taken out to buy them. The banks are fully aware of this, and trust me, they're worried. But here's the truly mind-bending part. Even with all this happening, banks are still officially counting many of these troubled loans as performing. That means, on their books, everything looks fine. Tenants are leaving, the buildings are losing money hand over fist, but the numbers presented to the public paint a picture of deceptive stability. It's an accounting trick that keeps the system looking healthy while the underlying reality deteriorates. The Federal Reserve itself has estimated that over $400 billion in commercial loans are at an elevated risk of default. That's a staggering number. And here's where it gets personal for a lot of people. It's not the giant Wall Street banks that are most exposed. It's the small and regional banks, the ones in your local community. These smaller institutions hold nearly 70% of all commercial real estate debt in the entire country. That's a massive concentration of risk in a sector that most of us don't think about in our daily lives. Yet, this hidden vulnerability in small banks has the power to trigger a domino effect, creating systemic issues that could ripple through the entire economy. It's a quiet crisis, building in the background, and it's something we all need to be watching very, very closely. Have you ever wondered how a bank collapses? It doesn't start with blaring headlines and panicked crowds. It starts quietly, almost silently, with numbers hidden deep inside financial reports. And right now, some of those numbers are telling a story that most people aren't hearing yet. Let's break down what's happening behind the scenes in the U.S. banking system. It all begins with a simple concept: delayed recognition of losses. When loans, especially in commercial real estate, start to go bad, banks don't always mark them down immediately. Instead, a few quiet signals begin to appear. The first is rising delinquencies. More and more borrowers are late on their payments. You won't see this on the evening news, but it's a critical first domino. As delinquencies rise, banks are supposed to increase their allowance for credit losses, or ACLs. This is the money they set aside to cover expected future losses. But what if they don't set aside enough? This is where the quiet pressure builds. They might be hoping the market will recover, that those bad loans will somehow become good again. But hope isn't a strategy. All this time, the real value of their assets, like office buildings in half-empty cities, is falling. The gap between what the assets are worth on paper and what they re-worth in reality grows wider. This is the silent phase. No panic, no headlines. Just a slow, steady buildup of risk. But eventually, one bank has to face the music. It finally recognizes the losses. Suddenly, its ACLs have to jump dramatically. This single action sets off a chain reaction. When their ACLs shoot up, their capital ratios, a key measure of a bank's financial health, take a nosedive. This is when regulators step in. They tighten their oversight and start asking tough questions. And it's only then that the story starts to leak out to the public. The headlines begin to appear. Bank under review, capital ratios falling. The depositors see this and start to get nervous. They wonder, is my money safe? Some decide not to wait and find out, and they start moving their funds to other banks. Once depositors start pulling their money, the situation escalates rapidly. The bank, already weakened by its losses, now faces a liquidity crisis. This leads to the final stage. Emergency merger talks begin. By the time you read that headline, the real damage was already done months, maybe even a year earlier. The collapse started quietly and only became loud at the very end. So, let's be crystal clear. This isn't about spreading fear or predicting doomsday. The U.S. banking system isn't on the verge of collapsing tomorrow. But these quiet problems, if they're ignored, have a nasty habit of becoming very loud, very suddenly. The key takeaway is that the most important indicators are the ones that banks aren't talking about yet. So what can you, as a citizen, an investor, or a business owner, do about this? The first and most powerful step is awareness. You don't have to be a Wall Street analyst to understand the basics. Start by watching for trends in loan delinquencies. Pay attention to the commercial real estate market, especially in major cities. Are office vacancies rising? Are property values falling? These are public signals. You can also follow FDIC reports, which track trends in things like allowance for credit losses across the banking sector. Understanding that the numbers banks present aren't always the full story is crucial. The quiet indicators often paint a much more accurate picture than flashy, optimistic headlines. And remember this fundamental truth: banks survive on confidence. They want you to feel calm, stable, and secure. They have every incentive to project an image of strength, even when cracks are forming beneath the surface. But for those who are paying attention, it's possible to see those cracks long before they become catastrophic failures. Looking back at history, from the 2008 financial crisis to the regional bank failures we've seen more recently, the pattern is always the same. The warning signs rarely make the front page until it's far too late. By watching these subtle indicators now, you're not panicking. You're preparing. You're gaining insight, context, and a valuable edge. In a world filled with financial uncertainty, that awareness is one of the most powerful tools you can have. Quiet doesn't always mean safe. The hidden pressures in the system are real, and they deserve our attention. Thanks for watching. If you found this breakdown helpful, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the stories shaping our economy. See you next time.